we have talked about the syllabus, and then we are gonna have a very quick Python review. So for this part, I'm not trying to teach you Python. Those are the content you are expected to know before joining this course. And if you are a little bit rusty about the Python, but you know Python, and then this is the time you want to review some of the basic Python coding. Or if what I have said in the next 30 minutes are something foreign to you, and then probably you are not quite prepared yet. So the first thing first, we are doing the Python 3 and not Python 2. And then for the Python PyCharm, that you are going to use the community edition. Okay? So, well, for the basic data types in Python, and you should know the integers, the float, and the Boolean, and what are they, and what kind of operators can be done on them. And we have the plus, minus, and multiplication. Well, and how about I ask you a question? In Python 3, if you're doing integer divided by another integer, are you going to have an integer or a float? Okay, so if you have forgotten that, go ahead and try that by yourself. Okay, well, for the strings, well, string is just a sequential of the letters or characters. And in Python, we can define a string with either a pair of the double quotes or a pair of the single quotes. And for a string, and then if you want to access one character in the middle of the string, and remember we have the indexes, and for the indexes, if you count from the left side to the right side, and that is from 0, 1, 2, and then they increase. And there's also another way that if you want to use the negative indexes, like this one or this one, and then we can also count the indexes from the right side to the left side, and that is -1, -2, -3. Okay, so you can do either way, and you should be able to do both. So 0 and then go on to the +1, or -1 and -2, -3 all the way to the left side. Okay, and if you want to access a substring, and then in Python this is called slicing. Okay, well, in the slicing you do the square bracket, and then you specify where to start, where to end. For start point, that is included. For the end point, it's excluded. Okay, and a few more things about string, and there are some functions like the len. Well, the len means the length of an object. You can use that to get the length of a string. You can also get the length of a tuple, a list, and a dictionary, or some other data types. And then you have the concatenation. That is a string plus another string, and that is to concatenate two strings together. And repeat. You can repeat a string for a specific number of times, and you can check the in operator. That is, you want to check whether the first string is a substring of another one. Okay, and then we also have the methods. Okay, well, you need to know the difference between the function and the methods. Just now, for this one, the len, that is a function. And then for the methods, well, the method syntax is different because we are doing an object dot a method name, and if you want to specify parameters, and we can also specify parameters. Okay, and for example, for strings, we have both some functions supported, and then we also have some methods supported. And for example, if we have a DNA as a string, and then if you want to do a DNA.find t, we are finding a letter t from a sequence of characters. That is the DNA. And then it will give me 3. And if you check the syntax, that is the object dot and then a method name. So this is a method call, not a function call. Okay, well, later in 15-20 minutes, we'll also talk a little bit more about object-oriented. Okay, and the next data type is list. So list, well, if we put a bunch of the items, and then we add the square bracket at the beginning and the very end, and then that is a Python list. And well, in Python we can have any data type together into a list, and we can have a list of a list as well. And if you have a empty pair of the square bracket, and then that is a empty list. Okay, and then for the list, we can also do square bracket I, and using I as an index to access a specific item in the list. Okay, and for the list, and then we can do the indexing as well, and we can do the negative indexes too. And if you do the more than one indexes, and this means, well, usually you are trying to access one member inside a member in a list. Say, well, if you want to do the -1, and that will give you the top level last item, which is a sublist D and E. And then the second index is a 0, and then you will grab the first item from the sublist, so you will have the D. Okay, and then for the list, we can also have the slicing. We talk about slicing when we review the strings. Okay, and here are some more operators. We can do the length, and we can do the concatenation too. And and after doing the concatenation, and remember, the original one is not changed. So we have the determiners, and then plus another list. So, well, this will create a new list for you. However, the original one stays the same. Okay, well, here, this is just a small thing that may vary from language to language. And if you have been doing, say, Java for a long time or Ruby for a long time, and when you come back to Python, and you may find something is a little bit weird, but anyhow, it's not a big problem, and usually you can just simply write a small piece of code to check that out. Okay, and for this one, determinants dot index a. Well, we have a list of the determinants, and then we want to get the list of the item A, and then we will have a 2. So let me ask this again, is that a function call or a method call? It should be a method call, because we are doing object dot a method name again. Okay, and for the Boolean, well, Boolean is a kind of a easy data type in Python. We only have 2 values, true and false. Okay, and like 5 equals 3 plus 2, and then that will be a true, because on the left side we have 5, and on the right side we also have 5. So 5 equals 5, and this will give you a true. And in Python, there's something special, like Python can evaluate, you can evaluate any data type as a true or false. And for example, and if you have an integer 0, and this will be evaluated as a false, and all the other numbers will be evaluated as true. And for the empty objects, like an empty string or an empty list, they will be evaluated as falses, and all the other items, like non-empty string or non-empty tuple or non-empty a list, they will be evaluated as true. So this is something special in Python. And for the control flow, and I'm talking about the if and else. So if and then a condition, and well, in Python we are using the colon. So colon means that we are starting a new code block, and for a code block it will indent a little bit. And for example, like for if a condition, and then inside we have 2 lines of code, and they are both indented. In Python we are using indentation to say this is a code block belongs to a certain branch. For example, it could be a if, it could be else, it could be a for loop, or it could be a while loop. Okay, and well, we can have the if and else. We also have the if, elif, and else in case we have multiple branches. And in the next part, control flow, we can do a couple of different ways for the iteration. Say we can do a while loop, we can do a for loop, and then and for the for loop, usually we want to do the ranges. And for example, if you want to create a iteration that it runs for exactly 10 times, and then you can do for n in the range from 0 to 10, and then this will guarantee to run for a total of 10 times. And for the values of the n, remember that is from 0 to 9. Okay, so the range 0, 10, well, the start point 0 is included and the end point 10 is excluded. So really we have from 0 to 9, but still that there are a total of 10 numbers. Okay, well, and there are a couple of different ways to do the iteration and to visit all the members of a list. So the variant 1, you can do for item, which is the current prime, and in the prime numbers. Okay, so we are using the current prime as a control variable to visit all the values in this list. And another way is, well, you can do for I in the range of the length of the prime numbers, and then you are using the I as a control variable. But this I is the index. Okay, so you have to do current prime equals the prime numbers with the square bracket I. Okay, so what's the difference? The first one, that's of course easier. However, if you want to have a control or have the information about the corresponding indexes, and then you may have to use the second word. Okay, and let's a little bit more control flow. Well, for the break statement means that in the middle of iteration, if you hit the break, and then the whole iteration will finish. So we are going to finish the entire iteration. And for the continue, if we hit continue, this means for the current round, we are going to finish early, but then we will go on to the next round if there is the next round. Okay, well, in working with files, well, in Python, we can open the file and then we can open for reading or writing. So the syntax is open a file name, and then if you're using R, and that is for reading, and then if you open a file for W, that is for writing. Okay, and if you open a file for reading, and then you can do an iteration to visit all the lines one by one, or if you open a file for writing, and then you can do a file, out file, and then dot write, and then you can write a string into the file. Okay. So the next part, functions. Well, we are going to use the functions from time to time in this course, and the syntax of the function is you want to do a keyword define for def for define, and then the function name and parentheses, and then parameter or parameters. And we do have to use the return value to return something, and then well, for the function call, we can do the function name and parameter, and then a parentheses, and then a parameter. Okay, and if you want to do a default argument or a default parameter value, and then you can also do that in Python. Okay, and the next, and the dictionary. So dictionary is a collection of the key value pairs. So we have a key and then a corresponding value, and another key, another corresponding value. Well, you can consider dictionary as, well, probably a English to Spanish dictionary. So all the English words will be the keys, and then all the corresponding Spanish words will be the values. Okay, well, and for the syntax, we are using the curly braces, and then a key colon value, another key colon another value. Okay, so that's it for the dictionary, and this is the type we are going to do a deeper dive in this course. Okay, the next part, object-oriented. Well, how do you create a class by yourself? Well, you want to use the keyword class, and that is the name of the keyword to define a class. And then inside, you want to define init, underscore init, and this is called a constructor. Okay, and then for all the methods defined inside a class, and you have to start from the variable self. Okay, and then, well, for the self, it just means that we are touching the current object that triggers this method call. Okay, and then if we are doing the self.name, and this means name is an attribute of this class, and then for the self.name, this means we are touching the attribute name for the current object we are trying to manipulate, or the current object that triggers this method call. Okay, and then, well, for the self name, again, if you're trying to print the self name, and then this self means again the current object, and then we are trying to grab the name attribute from the current object. So, well, if this kind of syntax is a little bit foreign to you, and remember the second reference book on the syllabus, that is the textbook you may want to take a look. Okay, well, and if you want to create an object, and then you, well, first you want to use the constructor, and in the constructor, you are gonna, the first parameter is self, of course, and then if the second parameter is n, and then inside the constructor, you say the self.name equals n. This means when the constructor is triggered, a parameter will be sent into the constructor, and then in the constructor we are going to assign this n to the self.name. So when we initialize an object, and then for the attribute name, it will be the n sent by the caller of the constructor. Okay, and say if you want to do a student Alice, and then this Alice will be the n here, and then in the definition of the constructor, and then we are going to assign this n to the current object as the attribute name. So, well, this is how we create a student, and then the name is Alice. Well, and for the constructor, we can do multiple parameters. And for this constructor, I'm using the first name, the last name, and the campus ID. So we are sending the first to the first name, and the last to the last name, and the campus ID to the campus ID. So there are a total of 3 attributes in the class of the student. Okay, well, that's a lot. Well, why? Because we just did a full review of CS1, and for all the content I just talked about, if you find okay, those are the content I remember, or those are content I have used in last semester, and then you're good to go. Or if you say, okay, I kind of know this, however, they are kind of different to C++, or they're kind of different to Java, and probably you want to grab the first reference book in the syllabus, or you can find any open resources online to do a very quick tutorial about Python, because later in this course I'm not gonna teach basic Python to you guys, and if you're struggling with the basic Python when you are doing some fancy algorithms, and then this course will be really painful to you.